All right, we're live.
Hey.
There it is. It's John and Nate from Comic Book Curious. We are recording the very first episode of the official Comic Book Curious podcast.
Hallelujah.
That's right. This is going to be sort of episode 0, which will give a little introduction to what to expect from the podcast on a week-to-week basis.
I am just closing my tabs because my computer is starting to sound very loud.
There you go. Yeah. So this should be an adventure as we start to record this, but come along with us as we do this, and obviously this will be out. I think the idea is to have this out next week. Will be when this actually comes out on the official podcast feed. So check
Yeah,
that.
John, thanks for spearheading this. You're kind of an expert in the podcast space. Now you're a StreamYard expert. Why don't you tell us a little bit of background about your background for those of you who don't, for those of the people out there that don't know you and your
Yeah.
fans, of course. Yeah.
Look, I've been doing podcasts for 6 years now. I think I've been podcasting on various shows. And honestly, my expertise is mostly just from trial and error, man. Some of those early days of podcasting were hard to figure out, and there was a lot of failures up front. Fellow comic book curious writer Mike Ergoni has been with me the whole time for that adventure in podcasting, and he ended up starting his own podcast as well, which will soon to be seen on the Comic Book Curious Network as well. So yeah, it's just been a lot of figuring it out bit by bit. But yeah, I've been talking into microphones and releasing that out into the void that is the internet for 6 years now, which is crazy to think about because it's hard to remember a time before I was podcasting. It's one of
You
my
know, I gotta tell you, I just met John. For those of you who aren't listening yet, in real life, this week, and it was very cool to feel John's energy outside of a screen, which was a different thing. Like I'm this really verbose, like and in person, John's like you're more of like introverted, but like on the screen, you're very like just you've got this great golden voice and you're so smart and you've got all these great things to say, and then in person we were like, hey, how you doing? And I was like, and it was just really funny to see someone in real life. I liked it.
Yeah. No, it's definitely. There's no question. I am most comfortable behind a microphone, having done podcasting. I also used to work in radio. I did a morning radio show for a while up in Washington. So I've spent. I'm pretty confident on a broadcasting mic. And with that said, I think we're going to start recording the actual podcast now. This is our little intro that only whoever's watching this or watching it whenever you end up watching it, it gets to hear before we actually leap into the podcast. So, Nate, if you are ready, I'm going to start. I'm going to hit record, and we're going to, for the first time, lay down some Comic Book Curious podcast.
Let's go.
All right. Welcome to the first introductory episode of the official Comic Book Curious podcast. I'm John Campbell.
And I am Nate Lombardi.
Oh, here it is, Nate. It begins right here. Episode 0, the introduction of Comic Book Curious, the podcast.
Wow, that sounds so official.
I know, right? It's one thing to talk about it, but to actually hit record on it and be here talking into microphones and doing Comic Book Curious, the podcast, it is exciting because we've been doing the website for a few months as of the recording of this, and now we're and we also have the YouTube channel, but now we're expanding into yet another medium as we slowly take over the multimedia space.
Hallelujah. Let's go. And I am so grateful that this is your bread and butter, that this is what because there's so much to learn, as and Sean Wynn knows, we've been kind of just building the plane as we're flying it. So this space that you're so comfortable in it's like a warm blanket, John. Thank goodness.
That's what I strive to be. I strive to be the audio equivalent of a warm blanket, Nate. Yeah. So basically, the whole point of this, we wanted to lay down sort of a short episode before we really launch with the meat of the podcast, and give you people an idea of what to expect on a week to week basis. And we've got a lot of cool stuff. We've already been gathering content for the podcast. And I think we should start by saying that next week, the first official episode 1 of the podcast, we have a very exciting guest, Chelsea Kane. We have an almost hour-long interview with Chelsea Kane.
It was actually really fun to get Chelsea to come on the podcast because I got her email and she said, "How did you get my email?" And I was like, am I supposed to tell you that?" And we had this back and forth and I'm not exaggerating. It was probably like 8 emails, and I went, "Hey, like, hi, I'm doing this thing and I'm into kids." And it was slowly, I just started being like, "You seem pretty cool. Who's your favorite person, Nail Gaming? Because you do all this cool stuff." And then she's like, finally, after 8 emails back and forth, she's like, "Fine, I'll be on your podcast." And and we had a great time. We hit it off. She is not only like smart as a whip, but a lovely human and doing really very cool, innovative stuff with her kids to create comic books, which is something that is exactly what I'm trying to do. So it was a great interview, and we just kept talking. So I'm a fan of her as a human, and I literally listened to my first spy novel or whatever genre that is that she writes.
She writes thrillers and then the such. Yeah.
Yeah.
Her books are great. Her comic books are awesome as well. And yeah, I mean, I like the order. Because there's definitely when you reach out to creative types and things like that, they have very limited time. So I think there is a skepticism as to what you are looking for from somebody when you reach out to them, whether that be at conventions or text or email. So you were able to break through some of that barrier. And she, and I think you guys discussed some of this in the interview. She has had, not the greatest relationship with social media. There's been some really unfortunate backlash that is totally unearned on her part from some of the more toxic aspects of the fandom. And that's something we at Comic Book Curious, the website, the podcast, everything we do are striving to get as far away from as possible. That is the worst side of quote unquote fandom, because I really do think if that's the kind of attitude you're bringing to it, then you're not really a fan of this stuff. Is how I feel about it.
Naive me a year ago thought, hey, why don't we do this cool superhero universe and this really cool online magazine that's about nerd culture? Because everybody loves the Avengers, everybody loves Star Wars, everybody loves Star Trek, right? It's just something that everybody can agree upon. And then talking to you and Sean Wynn, you were like, actually, buddy, it's not like that. And I was like, what do you mean it's not like that?
Yeah, I mean, I envy your naivete about that early on, Nate, because it is just like, well, it's cool stuff. Why wouldn't people love it? And if you don't love it, then you don't engage with it, right? Like that's how I've always felt. Like I've never understood the impulse to dislike something and let it be known how much you dislike it, and go at the people who create it and tell them how much you dislike it. That just seems like a waste of your and everyone else's time, but people do it.
Well, I feel like I am in a unique position because I grew up in the suburbs until I was in college, and I went to a small liberal arts school, and then I moved to Harlem, and I lived in Harlem for 19 years. And I was a nice guy before I moved to Harlem. I come from a good family, nice people, camp counselors, teachers. But living in Harlem and teaching in Harlem and running projects in Harlem and Far Rockaway and Flint, Michigan, has landed me in a very unique position where I have fallen in love with people of color. I've lived around them. They've been the people, so many people are so dear to me. So for me, as a guy who has truly lived in both environments, for me to not use my voice and share my experience and talk about what I've learned from living in Harlem or from, Far Rockaway or wherever I've been, would be a disservice to not only my people and my friends and the people that I love. But I'd be remiss to do it. So I'm so glad that you're from Portland, that you are highly progressive in this wonderfully progressive town.
You know,
That's
look,
all.
I mean, the Portlandia people said it best, right? When it started, the dream of the '90s is alive in Portland, man.
Yeah,
We are still living on that sort of granola hippie grunge vibe that started there. It just never stopped out here.
yeah.
You
I
just
think I
visited us for the first time.
Yeah, I just was there last week for the first time to visit you, John. You were one of the main reasons I came, and to be at Rose City Comic Con.
Yeah.
We threw a little party,
Mhm.
and I was so baffled by the friendly nature of
Portlanders, yeah.
Portlanders.
Yeah.
Y'all just talk. Even the last person I talked to at the airport, I mean, I talked to her for like 25 minutes. She was just getting me on the plane. She actually got me on a better flight and a better seat. And she's like, "Yeah, I was a New Yorker too, but I came out here and
Yeah.
I just and I was
Yeah, I am a rarity, and I'm a born and raised Portlander because I feel like a lot of people moved here, especially in the last probably 5 to 10 years, because we do have a pretty good rep. If you're sort of a liberal-minded, nature-loving person, right? Because we're Portland is a major city, but you drive 20 minutes outside of it, and you're out in the woods, you're at the mountains, you're at the beach. We have it's a big reason why I really don't ever want to live anywhere else, because I can kind of go to any environment here. You go out to Eastern Oregon, you're out in the desert, so it's we're pretty well located in terms of different backgrounds and locales to visit and stuff like that. So
It's just beautiful. The people are so lovely, and the food is incredible. I mean, we had 100% home runs with our meals. It was amazing.
and an eclectic mix of different kinds of food. You can get pretty much anything here and get a good version of it. And the other thing that really works for our brand here at Comic Book Curious is Portland's a huge comic book town, huge comic book town.
Hey, Angeli, we were just talking about you.
Look at
Yes,
that.
it is a huge She's our first. She also was there for when I did my first live Instagram live feed. Uh, and we're going to premiere our episode next week, John. Is that right?
Yeah. As of this recording that you're listening to this on the podcast, then it's already been out. But yeah, while we're recording this, yeah, next week, Angeli's first piece will be coming out, so that's exciting.
Yes. Super talented human. Lovely, lovely human. And she came to our party last week and I got to see her in person after we had spoken for an hour. And she's going to be doing a couple pieces for us. Which I'm very excited about. She
Absolutely.
gets it, man. She gets it.
Totally. Very, very excited to see what she writes for us. And also, I mean, that's another thing. We have a hugely talented staff of writers here at Comic Book Curious, and you're going to get to hear those people on the podcast. In addition to interviews with awesome creators like Chelsea Kane and cool fans and people just doing awesome things for the community and stuff like that, connected to comic books and pop culture. We're going to feature a ton of our writers on the show who will come on and talk about the things they're passionate about. They're honestly probably naked to end up educating you on a lot of stuff because you are not one to hide your newbie nature when it comes to a lot of this stuff, and that's great. That's where one of our whole mission statements behind Comic Book Curious is to be able to spotlight things that are for brand new people. We're not just here to deep dive into Green Lantern number 67 from back in the day or whatever. I think a lot of our episodes are going to take on that aspect of you being taught about a lot of this stuff, which I know you're excited to learn about it.
I am, and that's the whole, I guess the nexus of everything was when I was in Harlem teaching a bunch of middle school kids and going to the UN a bunch and knowing how much that Black Panther and Wonder Woman really hit them. it hit me too, and I'm a huge fan. I mean, I grew up with Spider-Man Underoos and loved it, but by no means did I go deep into it. We didn't really have the money to buy comic books. I was ADD. Even now, when I read, I'm like, so I listen to all my books.
Yeah.
So for
And actually,
me,
that's a big thing. A lot of the big comics companies are making audio versions of a lot of their classic comic books now. So we'll have to hook you up with some of those, and
yeah,
also new audio adventures, because DC is teamed up with Spotify for a whole bunch of audio only exclusive brand new stories with their characters in audio form.
I listened to The Sandman on
Right?
Audible,
So
right? And then I like went online and I looked at it. I was like, oh, this isn't the art that I expected. I was listening to Neil Gaiman and the guy who played Professor Xavier,
yeah, James McAvoy. Yeah,
James Mac, and I met him in person. He's a very nice guy,
I've heard.
very sweet. But yeah, like my experience with The Sandman is an Audible book.
Right.
Which
And will soon be a Netflix series adapting it, so we'll have yet another interpretation of Sandman, which is a cool thing about these characters, and something we're celebrating here at Comic Book Curious is these characters start on the page as a comic book, become an audio show, a TV show, a movie franchise. And it's so just before we were recording, I was watching the new episode of Why the Last Man, which is based on one of my all-time favorite comic books, and it's now a TV show on FX. So yeah, it's crazy to see how much these characters and these worlds have expanded into the I will say quote unquote mainstream, because I feel like comic books and superheroes have become the mainstream, really. I mean, like it's no longer a weird little thing. Avengers Endgame is the highest grossing movie of all time. So
Well, I am so lucky that Sean introduced us because your brain is so impressive. Who was that guy that we were talking about? Ted or whatever, the president of or the head of content at Netflix.
oh yeah,
You
Ted
have
Sarandos, yeah.
Yeah, how your brain. Look, Angeli loves James McAvoy. Yeah, he's awesome,
He
so talented.
super talented. I mean, if you've seen his work in the M. Night Shyamalan movies, Split and Glass, my God,
Yeah,
he plays like 27 characters as one person, and
yeah,
he's amazing as Professor Xavier as well. Uh,
yeah,
but
yeah.
Yeah.
Just a
No, I
great
mean, look,
cast.
my brain is filled with a bunch of stuff that's not real. I'm glad I found you, Nate, and Comic Book Curious, because it's an outlet for me to have a job where it's a point of pride, and actually works in favor of my work, that I've spent a lifetime watching movies and reading comic books.
You
Uh,
know, I'm a big jazz fan, and before I met you, I heard there's this expression or this saying that they say, jazz musicians are the only people that will get paid and go to a gig, and they'll gig, and then they'll leave that gig and they'll go play for free at another gig,
yeah.
just because they love it. It's their life, and I kind of feel that's the way it is for you. Like your job is your passion.
I mean, that's the thing. I would be having these conversations, discussing these characters, working on stories, no matter what. And that's a big thing I love about the comic book specific community, because when you get into movies, obviously there is lots of money and things like that around, which is, not no slight against that. But comic books are a very small community. There is not a ton of money in the comic book medium specifically. So if you are making comic books, you are doing it because you love comic books, not because some people use it as a gateway to other things, but like the lifers are there because we just love them. It's not, and you got to meet some people like that at the convention,
I
uh,
did.
who are just in it purely for the love of this medium.
I'm so glad that it's so much more fun to do this with you than to do it by myself. I did a Instagram live at the airport, and and I was talking to a couple people, but it's so much nicer to talk to you. I Something that you and I spoke about. Who was that guy?
Ron Randall, the great Ron.
Ron Randall,
We'll be
and
putting up that interview on our YouTube soon.
yeah, and Mark. What's his name?
Mark Russell.
Mark Russell. These guys, legends.
Yeah.
And just the sweetest guys you've met. And I'm such a huge fan of that, of any type of artist that is at the top of their game, that they're humble. And it's usually the people that are scraping to get up to the top that are kind of petty. So
Well,
I Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's interesting about comic books also, aside from not only is there not a ton of money in it, but there's not really fame in it as there is in the other ways. Meaning you can write Batman or Superman, the most recognizable characters in the world, but nobody knows who you are. You walk down the street and nobody's pestering you outside of a comic convention where you are the biggest celebrity in the world.
Right.
But beyond that, so there is no that ego doesn't get built up, I think is a lot of it. So it's just like, well, yeah, man, I just write about and also, I mean, these are guys and women as well who are just uh sitting in their homes typing up stories. They're
Yeah.
still just sort of working. Ron Randall said that in his interview that he is happiest just in the dark with his paper and pencil drawing his comic book. You know, that's what he would do 24/7 if he could. It's all the conventions and the promotional work and stuff like that that's the real job for him.
So for the fellow newbies out there,
Yeah.
you're allowed to pay these famous artists
Mhm.
to like create like a Spider-Man head for you,
Yeah.
or and you commission their talent.
Yeah.
So it's like $130 or $150 or
Yeah.
200, depending
Yeah,
on.
different people charge at different levels. Obviously, a lot of that's to do with that's where the hierarchy of how long you've been in it, how successful you've been in it, certainly goes up. But yeah, I mean, and that includes also how big a piece you want. Do you want a big full piece thing? Some people, another thing, I don't know if we actually saw any of this in person, but people will bring there's a sketchbook, and the whole idea is each page they'll get a different person to do a commission on, so that you can have an entire sketchbook filled with different characters and pieces of art by different people.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I looked at I asked Ron to do a character that I had created. He's a Greek character, and he handed it to me, and I got a little bit choked up. I was
Yeah.
like, this is super cool. The way he did the face and the eyes, I went, this is a whole nother level, and that came from my brain. How fucking
I
cool
mean,
is that?
that is really, there's nothing quite like that. Seeing something you created exist on a piece of paper like that is an incredibly moving moment. I've certainly had that with creations of my own as I develop comic books as well. That is just to get that art back from an artist and to go, oh, that's the character I came up with, and there they are, they exist. You know, it's really quite a feeling, especially as somebody who does not have that skill set at all. Uh, which was very disappointing to me as a kid who loved comic books. And I got every book about how to draw the Marvel heroes and everything like that, and just never had that core skill set. Because I do think it's a skill set that can be expanded on and become a professional at. But there does seem to be an inherent talent that needs to be there from the base to start with, and I just never had that. As
Oh
much
yeah.
oh, I wanted to, and there'd be no question that would be my entire life if I had that. I would have just gone in and drawn comic book characters forever. But so to be a writer, and we met a lot of people like that. How many of the writers did we meet at the convention who, when we asked, "Did you also draw the comic?" You would ask them, and how many of them went, "Oh God, no, 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 I can't." And that's what I would say as somebody who writes comics is I would say, no, 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 no.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, I didn't know about the hierarchy, or like you would think that writers would have like um, the bigger accolades or the bigger, but it seems and tell me if I'm wrong, John. It seems as though like the writer illustrator people have like the Todd McFarlanes or the people that do both. They're kind of the kings and queens of the hills.
Yeah,
Is that how it works?
I mean, to a certain extent, yeah, because that is the magic combination. If you have both of those skills, then you are a one man band at that point, right? Like,
Hmm.
I mean, that writers are. I've heard a lot of writers talk about. We're always scared when artists can write because, hey, do we even have a job at that point? You know, and so there's sort of that. But yeah, your Frank Millers and stuff like that are a big deal in that sense. And the other thing I think between the writing and the artist, now honestly, a lot of the time writers, especially now, get a lot more of the acclaim. Uh, but the art is the way harder job, which is not to say writing is not hard by any means, but just sheer time. I can write a script for a comic in a week, even a couple days if like push comes to shove. but it takes an artist like a month to draw an issue of a comic book.
Yeah.
It's why you'll see a writer writing 5 books monthly and an artist is only doing 1 because
Right.
it's so much more intensive, obviously, because you're sitting there crafting each panel and it needs to be consistent and all at the same level, and you kind of can't cut corners on any of that stuff. So
Well, I learned a good lesson, and I put my foot in my mouth with this really successful writer named Teeny Howard.
Tini Howard, yeah, who writes
Uh,
Excalibur for Marvel.
Sure, it's Excalibur. She wrote, a whole bunch of stuff.
She used to write. She wrote a Thanos run that's really good.
Yeah,
She's
yeah.
currently writing Hulkling and Wiccan, which is a cool comic book for Marvel as well. But yeah,
So sweet. We went back. So hi, Christelle. Hi, Kristen. Our 2 favorite girls on the show. Hello.
we're trying to get a little audience here.
It's great. So, not that you're not our favorite girl, Angela. You're totally working your way up there, but I would, get, have to sleep on the couch if I didn't say that, right? Um, no, but when Teeny said, she said, "Hey, you know," I said, "Well, don't you want to write movies?" Because her husband is in the movies, and she said, "You know what? I love writing comics." And John, why don't you tell why she said that?
Oh, well, I mean, basically, she said, I mean, because she has more control of a comic book, right? A movie screenplay is really a blueprint to hand to a bunch of other people.
Yeah.
So you are just sort of sketching the bare bones of a project, and then it gets handed to a director, an editor, a costume department, set design, all that stuff. And none of that is your job to figure out. And obviously, the way movie business works, if you're purely a writer, you hand that script off, and then most of the time you have nothing to do with it ever again.
Right.
Whereas a comic book, if you're writing it, you write it and then you give it to your artist, and that's it. It's basically a 2 to 3, maybe 4 person job, because you can also get the colorist and the some people have separate inkers, some people and then you have your letterer as well who puts in all the words.
I mean, so
It's a small group compared to the hundreds of people it takes to make a movie.
So there are some great courses out there. I took a course with this guy named Andy Schmidt, and I took a class with Carl Potts, and I took a class with Jim Higgins.
Yeah.
And
we have interviews with Jim Higgins and Carl Potts on our YouTube channel right now.
Yeah, and I will interview Andy as well. Andy is a big deal. He just did the Crime Syndicate. He's done everything from Star Trek to Transformers to X-Men to Avengers. He's a real big deal in the comic book world. But he has a thing called Comics Experience. Shout out to Comics Experience, where professionals teach amateurs, what it is to do that to make a comic book, and all those things that you don't even think about, like the zooming in and the point of view, and all of these things that are maybe make it interesting, you don't realize when you're just consuming.
Right. There's a lot of invisible artistry in comic books. It's one of the big reasons I want to get some colorists on the show, because I feel like colorists are very much not spotlighted in comic books. It's sort of taken for granted that the comics are in color, but that is an entire art form, and that is somebody's specific job. And it is not just going in like a coloring book, It is very. So I have some colorist friends who I will get on this podcast because I know a lot of colorists, and I really and also letterers. You just think it's about getting the letters on there, but there's a lot of thought that goes into the font, the size, the emphasis on certain words and things like that when you're lettering a book. So it's a big thing I want to get into on episodes of the podcast, is really to take you through the production process of how a comic book is made, because it is more detailed and intensive than I think people think just from looking at them on the outside.
Yeah, and another thing is now it's a worldwide network. So I went on Fiverr today and I said, what can you get in the Philippines or Indonesia or India? What type of talent can you get to work on your if you're a writer? It's out there. I'm going to actually hire somebody, because my mom wrote a children's book about a moose in Vermont because she loved. So I'm going to hire someone for $50 a page or $70 a page to create a moose book for my mom. Like, how cool is that?
I mean, the artist on my comic book lives in Macedonia. We aren't anywhere we're the time difference between us is huge. You should see our emails because it's like there's almost a day turnaround between each of our responses to each other.
That's so
Um,
cool.
but that's how that works. And a lot of the top comics talent, particularly artists, a lot of the writers are still here in America, but a lot of the art comes from all over the world. And there's a huge amount of comic book artists coming out of Spain, out of South America, out of a lot of places, and then that because that barrier is down, especially with all the digital things. We can just send PDFs of pages across the world
Yeah.
instantly. So it's amazing, and we'll see that. Like the comics are getting more diverse just in general. Like not even that you have to take an initiative to do it, but just the talent is able to get a shot at it now. So
Yeah.
it's an exciting time for comic books, and it's something we'll see as we bring more and more people on the show to talk to them.
Yeah, and as I build my universe, I'm gonna start trying to source ideas, curation, and talent from around the world, and actually try to make that a real foundation of what I'm doing with this universe. That's gonna be like the difference that's with mine than others.
And we'll certainly hear more about your universe as we go forward on the show,
Okay.
week to week. That will come up. We'll also talk more about. We'll have a lot of shout outs to what's going on the website as well. We'll have a lot of content for YouTube. We're starting a Twitch network as well, so you'll be hearing us dive more into that. Which, if you're watching this on Twitch, then that's awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the and when we record these episodes, we're going to try to do more of these live like this as we can. Some of our stuff is inherently pre-recorded,
Yeah.
but we're going to do more and more live interviews with creators and stuff like that. So please find us. We're going to be on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and our Twitch channel. So we'll let you know when we're doing live episodes of the podcast, and you can come and ask questions. We might throw those to our guests and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
that
I think that should be the goal, is to do most of these live and to have those.
absolutely that will be our absolute goal. So we'll do that as much as we can. While respecting the schedules of
Mhm.
the individual people we're talking to. But yeah, we'll definitely be doing a lot of live episodes where people can ask questions and things like that, because we really want to encourage our audience and the people who are engaging with our content to be involved in that way. So uh,
And people will be able to see Kristen do her gaming
yeah,
thing with people on
that'll be over
Twitch.
on the Twitch. The Twitch channel is just starting up, so the podcast network's taking off, and then right on the heels of that will be our Twitch channel as well. So keep your eye on that, because there's a lot more fun stuff to come there. And we're also this is going to be a podcast network. This is not
Mhm.
just this is the official Comic Book Curious, our flagship show that Nate and I are hosting here. But we're also going to have other podcasts, several of which I will host as well, including Campbell and Jones Meet the Monsters, which is launching next month in October, which is myself and our staff writer, Brendan Jones, as we chart, as we say, the cinematic legacy of the classic monsters. So we will be following Dracula, Frankenstein, werewolves, because the Wolfman werewolves are weird because the Wolfman is an IP owned by Universal, so they're the
Oh,
ones who call him the Wolfman. But other werewolves, we're also doing Phantom of the Opera's in there, Mummy is in there, so stuff like that, and we'll follow them through the decades as we see different interpretations of them. So we're doing that. Also on the movie front, I'm doing my show, The Action Shelf, which has been going for a little while now. That's joining us, which is myself and Michael Listman, who's a very funny actor and comedian here in Portland, Oregon. He and I every week, and we frequently have guests on this. So Nate, we're gonna have to get you on an episode of this. We watch and review B straight to video action movies.
oh no.
So we are watching really low budget, we do a lot of Steven Seagal, Jean-Claude Van Damme, like the modern stuff, not their big famous stuff. So what they're doing now, that kind of stuff, plus old weird movies from the 80s and stuff like that. So that's a very funny, that's a real comedy-based show. We're also going to have Mike Gergoni. He's bringing his podcast, Material Components, which is a live play tabletop role-playing game. It started as a D&D game. Now, actually, the game they're playing is a game that Mike created. The
Oh,
game
really?
that you're playing is an original creation set in a world Mike created as well. So that's real. Yeah, he's a super talented dude. And so so that's got some fun people on it. And there's a couple other podcasts we're in discussions with to join our network. But so over the course of the next couple months, not only do we want you to subscribe to this show, which make sure you subscribe to our podcast on whatever podcatching software you use. We're on everything. That's Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, Audible, a million. I feel like every day somebody's telling me about some new podcast software that they're using, but we're on everything. So be sure to subscribe to us on there, and please review and leave comments about it. That helps us know who's out there and what you're enjoying about the show. Yeah, we're really excited to get started. Like I said, next week, our very first episode, our first official episode. This has just been sort of you and I rambling, Nate, but I hope you've had fun listening to this. But next week, we're thrilled to bring you our interview with Chelsea Kane. That's going to be really exciting stuff. Yeah, that's a big get for our first episode. That we're not starting out with nobody. That's a big name in the world of both literature and comic books. So look forward to that. And yeah, that's going to do it, I think, for this first introductory episode of Comic Book Curious, the official podcast. So, Nate,
Wow.
anything you want to leave people with?
Man, I'm just excited to be here and excited to do this with you, John. You are obviously a pro, and I can't wait to learn more and represent the newbies out there.
Absolutely. So that will yeah, stay tuned for next week's first official launch episode of Comic Book Curious, the podcast. But until then, I am John Campbell.
I'm Nate Lombardi.
Stay curious, everybody.
Stay curious. It's great. Thanks, Kristen. Thanks, Angela.
Thanks everybody for watching.
That was
for
cool.
A while, for the first couple minutes, there was nobody. There were 0 viewers, and I was like, we just seem like crazy people.
Well, it wouldn't be too far off.
That was no, it still didn't feel that weird. Thanks, Chriselle.
Hey.
Yeah, so that will be so next week. Yeah, Chelsea Kane on the podcast. So that'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, hey, Christelle's going to be reviewing what books are those, babe? They're going to be it's like Consent book on Omnipress.
Yeah, some of the Oni Press stuff.
Mm-hmm. And then she's also doing one about it's like they and them, like how those are used. So we got a new yeah,
we are crazy.
That's why you fit right in, Kristen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Kristen, we have to have you on the podcast.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And Max.
Yeah, we'll have to have some kind of Max content. There we go. An easy guide to consent. Yeah. That's great. We're gonna have a lot of stuff from Oni Press because we've been talking with them, and we're gonna feature a lot of their content. They're doing a lot of really cool stuff and a lot of varied stuff too.
Yeah, I can't wait to have a lot of money so we can just go to Comic-Con and buy everybody's stuff. Like this is like, and like commission everybody and be like, do this for Comic Book Curious, do this for Comic Book Curious. Like that's for me.
You had me at I can't wait to have a lot of money, but
yeah, that's
yeah, no. There's no question that's really cool. The other thing is we want to eventually get on, and if anybody out there knows anyone, we want to get on lists where people just send us comics as well. We don't even have to buy them, but send us stuff to review.
True,
like we're doing with Oni Press right now and stuff like that. That's going to be because that's a big place to get to. And as I've stated before, actually, aside from having a lot of money, I'd be thrilled to just have a lot of comic books. If people want to just give me comic books, not in place of money, I'll take the money too. But,
same,
but a lot of free comics is always nice. I got handed a couple of comics at the convention
Yeah.
That
Well,
that's always a nice thing. Mark Russell just gave me a copy of his Fantastic Four book. So
oh, that's cool.
yeah,
That's so
yeah.
cool. I bought some one of them. It's called what is it called? Kristen has it. It had to do with the Me Too movement. It was like a metaphor for the Me Too movement.
Hmm,
But it was robots, not all
oh,
robots or something like that.
that's interesting.
And it's funny. It's great. I'm a big fan of his, and that's like the first floppy one that I read. So when Kristen's done with all these comics, I guess you can read them too, right?
Yeah, something we've talked about that I think maybe it'll be a separate show from this, but it'll probably be a monthly show.
Mhm.
Is doing a podcast of like Comic Book Curious Book Club, where every
Yeah.
month we get a bunch of people together and we all read the same comic book and then discuss it on like an episode. I'm thinking of that as like a monthly show, and that would be myself and you, Nate, probably, and then a few revolving people, whoever wants to come on and do that month's book or whatever. But I think that would be a fun thing to, and then maybe we could tie that in by getting the creator of that on this show. I don't know. These are
Yeah.
just ideas. Uh,
Okay.
these are just some early ideas. We're just getting the podcast network started.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's exciting stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no question. So this will be the first show that launches. All right, Angelique says it sounds rad, so that's good.
Great.
Yeah, so this will be the first show, and then this is launching next week, and then I think in 2 weeks the action shelf will launch,
Okay.
because the monster show is launching in October along with our horror stuff, right? Because we're doing a bunch of horror stuff on there, so that's when we'll bring on the monster show. Mike show, we still need to get some final stuff taken care of, signatures and stuff like that.
Okay.
They know
Yeah.
that, but they're basically in. And then we're talking to a Star Trek podcast, and a Marvel podcast, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
All
Yep.
good stuff.
Lots of stuff.
Yeah,
Lots of ideas.
lots, lots,
So,
lots of good stuff. And then we're gonna have a meeting soon about the Twitch channels, about
oh
the Twitch
yeah.
channel and the shows going on there. So we're gonna get those going in the next couple weeks. Probably we'll have those up and running, and yeah. So lots of exciting stuff going on here at Comic Book Curious.
Well, thank you. Shout out to Books News Pictures. Yep,
Yep.
Christelle.
Yeah.
And so yeah,
Yeah, that's
Facebook.
somebody we want to get on the podcast. We're doing an article about Books with Pictures, but I really would like to get Katie Pride, the owner of Books with Pictures. She'd be a great guest on the podcast. She's a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah. She actually was one of the reasons she was. Yeah, she's great. I
Yeah.
look forward to growing. And Wacom Tablets, we got to have them on.
Yep. Wacom. That's a big partner of ours these days. So
Yeah.
that's huge. So yeah, we a lot of exciting stuff coming up. Stay tuned on here and on your podcast feeds as well.
Thanks, ladies, and whoever else is out there listening. Really appreciate it. That gave me a little energy. I can only speak for myself, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That was great. So yeah, we'll do more of these going forward. But yeah, thanks everybody for watching and for joining us as we venture forth into the world of podcasting and our first major live stream here on StreamYard, which seemed to go very well because people are watching in different places, which is we're broadcasting to Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch right now. So
Yeah.
and it's pretty easy. So yeah. Yeah.
Stay curious.
Stay curious. Now we're talking. There we go. Yeah. All right. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one. Yes.